Miss Carroll, is it Miss or Mrs. Carroll? Can you hear
I'm
me?
a Mrs.
Mrs.
I can, thank
Mrs. Carroll, I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting. The questioning went on just a bit longer. Part of the responsibility is mine, I have to say. So I hope you haven't found it too unpleasant twiddling your thumbs for a moment or two. Let me tell you who you're talking to. But first of all, you can tell us where you are. You're at home, are you?
I'm at home, yes.
And on your own there or not?
My husband's here, but in a different part of the house.
Right. Well, you're talking to a room in which there are, at the moment, 6 other members of the inquiry team, apart from myself. One of those is Shumik, in case you hear the name. He's responsible for making sure that you have the right document at the right time and highlights the appropriate bit. Beyond this room, though, is a much wider audience who've been waiting to hear what you have to say, and they number about 200 probably. Okay, so that's who you're talking to. Miss Richards. After you've been sworn.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Charlie will swear you.
Please state your full name.
Elizabeth Helen Carroll.
And repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely.
I do solemnly, sincerely.
And truly declare and affirm.
And truly declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Mrs. Carroll, you took up your post as Chief Executive of the Haemophilia Society in January 2014, is that right?
That's correct.
And you stepped down from that role relatively recently. When was that?
That was April, just over a year ago.
That was your first Chief Executive role, your statement tells us. Prior to that, you'd worked for a cancer charity and obtained a master's degree in voluntary sector management. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And before that, you worked as a nurse, including as a cancer nurse.
That's right, yes.
Broadly speaking, what were your roles and responsibilities as the Chief Executive of the Haemophilia Society?
The majority of my role was around ensuring that the organisation, the staff team were able to deliver our charitable objectives, which were to support and provide information and support to the people affected by bleeding disorders across the UK. It also involved advising the board to ensure that we complied with any governance compliance, working to campaign for better access to treatment and care, ensuring that we met our members' needs.
Now, one of the areas with which you became concerned in your first year as Chief Executive was the work being undertaken by the APPG, is that right?
I'm not concerned about their work, but I think thinking there could be more that they could do. In fact, they asked me if they thought there was more they could do to have more impact.
Yes, concerned, and it's probably the wrong word for me to have chosen, Mrs. Carroll. You had some involvement or provided some assistance in the conduct of the inquiry by the APPG, is that correct?
Absolutely, I'd suggested it could be an option to gather information together in one place. And I was sort of working to support them to enable the APPG to undertake the work, giving some guidance, really.
And we can see that if we look at MACF 5022_028. Sorry, that's an email from Mr. Spellman to Mr. Evans, trawling through the report after the the Commons debate after the APPG report. If we go to what's attached to it, so I think it must be the second page, Shomik. Yes, so we've got the date there, 15th of January 2015. And we can see from the top extracted passage from three-hour common debate following APPG report. So that gives us the date, I think, upon which the report was made public. And if we go to the next page, we can see about a third of the way down the page the reference to Diana Johnson, and reference is made to the Haemophilia Society, which provides the all-party group's secretariat, and then reference to you and your assistance in conducting the inquiry and producing the report. So is it fair to put it this way, that the APPG report had been one of the significant matters in which you had some involvement in your first year in office?
Yes, that's correct.
And we can take that down, thank you. Now, in that first year, prior to the meeting you had with Ms. Jan Barlow and Mr. Roger Evans on the 29th of January, which, as you know, I'm going to be asking you about, to what extent had you had dealings with the Macfarlane Trust?
When I first came into my role, one of the things I did was contact them to see if there was a way we could work together, along with other organisations. But it was one of the ways of working that I have is to try and work in collaboration. So I know I'd been in touch, probably with Jan Barlow, I suspect, to say, can we meet, look at ways of working together? And I know we'd met a couple of times. My recollection is it was after partnership meetings, before or after a partnership meeting that we both attended, to look at where we might have areas of work we could work together, but it wasn't a frequent thing for us to meet.
When you say partnership meetings, are you referring to the Caxton Foundation partnership group there?
I think they were. I can't remember exactly whether it was Caxton or MFT, but I'm fairly certain they were Caxton meetings because I don't think there were MFT meetings at that time.
Yes, certainly. I don't think we need to put it on screen, but I've got minutes of a partnership group meeting of the Caxton Foundation in August 2014, at which both you and Ms. Barlow are present.
Yes, that was.
So in the course of the period from when you took up your role in January 2014 to the meeting in question on the 29th of January 2015, what's your best estimate of how many times you and Ms. Barlow had meetings?
2, possibly. It was a very small number.
Had you, prior to the 29th of January 2015, met Mr. Evans?
Not that I remember. We may have met at an event, but not one-to-one or sort of in a way that I remember.
Now, the inquiry's heard or seen reference in a letter written by Mr. Evans in March 2015 to the chair of the Haemophilia Society, Mr. Bernard Manson, to there having been a deteriorating relationship with the Haemophilia Society over the preceding 12 months. Are you able to cast any light on that? Did you understand there to have been a deteriorating relationship?
No, to be honest, I there didn't feel like there really was much of a relationship, and there wasn't from the moment I started, so it hadn't changed or deteriorated in any way.
In your witness statement, you've referred to what you thought how Ms. Barlow saw her role, and the MFT's role. You've described learning that the MFT didn't lobby or fundraise, but distribute the money it was given, and I think you say you suspect but can't be sure that Ms. Barlow saw her role and that of the Macfarlane Trust as managing government funds rather than advocating for the community. Now, we've heard evidence in particular from Mr. Evans to suggest that it was the Haemophilia Society's role to campaign and advocate for the community. Would you accept that the Haemophilia Society had a campaigning and advocacy role in that regard?
Yes.
Did anyone from the Macfarlane Trust approach you, or to your knowledge, anyone else at the Haemophilia Society, and suggest that there was more that the Haemophilia Society should be doing?
No, I don't remember that at all.
Did you or anyone else at the Haemophilia Society approach anyone at the Macfarlane Trust and suggests that the Macfarlane Trust should be undertaking some form of campaigning or advocacy.
I do remember asking whether there was anything we could do to support any work they were doing in that way, so to work collaboratively, and the response was, no, we don't do that. And so I did ask why. I remember asking, why would you not do that? That's what many charities do.
Okay, so I think we might have a slight problem with the connection. Are you able to hear me, Mrs. Carroll?
Ms. Carroll, can you hear Council?
I think Mrs. Carroll's frozen on the screen.
Yeah. Yes.
I can, yes.
You can.
I can.
Right. We had you frozen for a moment or two. So do you want to go over the question again, please, Ms.
Okay.
Richards?
Yes, the question I'd asked was whether you or anyone at the Haemophilia Society suggested the Macfarlane Trust should be undertaking some form of campaigning or advocacy. This is your answer as we recorded it on the transcript, Mrs. Carroll. You said, I do remember asking whether there was anything we could do to support any work they were doing in that way, so to work collaboratively. And the response was, no, we don't do that. And I did ask why. I remember asking, why would you not do? That's what many charities do. Was there anything further that you wanted to say in relation to that we might have missed?
No, that was all I'd said.
Now, I want to then come to the meeting on the 29th of January 2015. What's your recollection of the reason that meeting was taking place?
I remember from reading through the notes rather than actually remembering that Mr. Evans and Miss Barlow had requested the meeting, but I didn't really know what the purpose of the meeting was. I put forward some points for discussion, but I don't remember ever having anything in advance to say this is why we would like to meet.
And this was, as far as you can recall, the first time you'd have had a meeting with Mr. Evans?
Yes.
What can you tell us from your present recollection about the course the meeting took?
We had a discussion about the APPG report that had come out just a few days before, and there had been quite a lot of media work from that. So we talked a bit about that. We talked a bit about the nomination potentially for a trustee from the Haemophilia Society to the Macfarlane Trust Board, because there was a vacancy that had come up. And we talked about the upcoming Penrose report and what may come out of that.
Now, as you know from what happened subsequently, you wrote a letter in which it was suggested that something in particular had been said at that meeting. What's your recollection now of what was said and by whom?
I remember quite clearly that Ms. Barlow said, when we were talking about the Penrose inquiry reporting, that it would be sensible for the government to delay their response to the Penrose inquiry, because more people would have died and there would be less money to pay.
Did you say anything in response to that?
I don't remember saying anything specific. I think, from what I remember, it was something like, really? But it wasn't, I didn't challenge it at that point.
Do you recall any response or reaction from Mr. Evans to that statement that you say Ms. Barlow made?
No, I don't.
What then happened next after the meeting?
The meeting was in our office, so having shown them out, the members of the team, there were only 3 or 4 other staff at the time, asked how it went, and I remember saying to them something to the words with the effect of, goodness, the thing that lots of our members have told us about was said, and that was really about the fact that the government were waiting for people to die, and so less money would have to be paid out.
So that was something you passed on to office staff?
Yeah, I think it's sort of something by then.
Now, if we look then at a document which is the minutes of a Board of Trustees meeting of the Haemophilia Society on the 4th of February 2015, so a few days later, it's WITN 3078010. Please, Shamik. If we go to the second page, we'll see the date there, 4th of February 2015. And then if we go, please, Shamik, to page 5, bottom of the page, we can see an entry in the minutes. The Haemophilia Society response to the recent APPG inquiry report and upcoming Penrose report. LC, that's you, was asked about the Haemophilia Society's response to the APPG report. Some discussion took place about the challenges of such research, etc., etc. Then you say this, Jan and Roger felt that I think is the APPG report, had given voice to people who are not usually heard. However, they were concerned that the Haemophilia Society might stitch them up. Where did that come from? Was that something that came from the meeting? Or?
Yes, I mean this report was of that meeting, so it would have been something that was said in the meeting.
Then there's a discussion about thoughts on future systems of support. And then bottom of the page, the possible implications of the Penrose report were then discussed, and Elsie stated this will have an impact UK-wide and might bring things to a head early into the new Parliament. The Haemophilia Society would keep the pressure on whoever is in government to make an announcement as quickly as possible. Jan then expressed her opinion that the DH should wait for as long as possible before making any decision, as more people will have died and there will be less people to pay and fight for payment. Elsie did not comment on this point. And then it says, so that's you, as I understand it, relaying to the Board of Trustees what you say Ms Barlow had said during the meeting.
That's correct.
Then it says the meeting ended with Elsie agreeing to report the conversation to the board and revert to Jan and Roger about the trustee nomination. When you refer to the meeting ending with you agreeing to report the conversation to the board, do you mean the overall conversation, rather than the specific statement that you say Ms Barlow made?
Yes, absolutely. So what we talked about as a whole.
Okay. Because as I understand your statement, you're not suggesting you had any conversation at the meeting about what you think Ms Barlow said.
No, we didn't have any conversation at the meeting.
Okay. There's then a discussion about term of office and trustee appointment. And then if we go further down the page, so the bit in bold print, actions, LC to draft a letter on behalf of the board to Jane Ellison MP, copied to, and then we see who it's going to be copied to. This should state our view that the current administration system is not fit for purpose. And then you're also going to be drafting a letter to Jan Barlow about the issue of appointing trustees. So that's the board discussion on the 4th of February. I just want to look then at the two letters that were drafted and dated the 10th of February, please, Mrs. Carroll. WITN 3078011. Next page. So this is the letter dated the 10th of February 2015 that, as we saw from the board meeting, it had been agreed would be sent to the Minister of State. We can see that you say, following the recent publications of the APPG and the backbench debate, the Haemophilia Society Board of Trustees have asked me to write to you with our response. Then we see in bold print the view that the current system of support provided by the 5 organisations is not fit for purpose, and the Society's view is there set out they should be disbanded. There's then reference to the importance of the Prime Minister making a formal public apology. You then, in the next paragraph, talk about the APPG report, and then you say this, you refer to having had a great deal of contact with people affected by contaminated blood, and also occasionally meet with the Chief Executive and Chairs of the MFT and Caxton Foundation. And then you say, although we do receive mixed views on the organisations, the overwhelming experience of those we speak to is dissatisfaction, distress or anger at the way beneficiaries of the organisations are treated. Some of this is directed at the Department of Health in terms of the level of support provided, but much is focused on the lack of respect and understanding of the issues beneficiaries face by the, go to the next page, the staff of these organisations. This is was also reflected in the many personal stories relayed by the MPs who spoke at the backbench debate. Now, pausing there, and before we come on to the, as it were, the disputed matter, is that a reflection of the Haemophilia Society's experience as a whole from those with whom it interacted, that it received substantial amounts of reports of dissatisfaction, distress and anger at the way in which the organisations operated?
That's right, yes.
And then we see what for present purposes is the key paragraph, the experience of the Haemophilia Societies backs this up, including at a recent meeting between myself and the Chief Executive Jan Barlow and Chair of the Macfarlane Trust Roger Evans, where they expressed the opinion that the Department of Health should wait before responding to Penrose, so more people will have died and they will have less to pay out. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment. You then say that in the next paragraph, this does not, in our view, reflect the stance we believe a chief executive and chair of a charity set up by the DH should hold. You say we've not taken this decision lightly, as we know any change may cause distress to some people. And then you refer in the next paragraph to, again, the matter of a transformation of the system of support. Now, if we go back to the paragraph that we see at the top of the screen, that is reporting, as I understand your evidence, Mrs. Carroll, what you say Ms. Barlow said at the meeting. Why do you use the word they when Mr. Evans did not, on your account, say what's said here?
Absolutely, it was Ms. Barlow that said it. What didn't happen at the time was Mr. Evans responding in any way, saying, that's not our perspective, that's not my thought. So there was almost, there was no disagreement with that. And so the word they was what I used, and the board approved, because it wasn't challenged in any way at that point. So it felt as if it was something maybe both of them thought or felt, because there was no challenge.
On the basis of your recollection of the meeting, which, and I think, Mrs. Carroll, you know that that's disputed by both Ms. Barlow and Mr. Evans, but on the basis of your recollection that this was something that was said by Ms. Barlow alone, do you think with hindsight that the use of the word they and the associating of this with Mr. Evans was a mistake?
It might have been, yes. I could have been more explicit in the letter, possibly, yes.
Now, that's the letter the 10th of February to the Minister. If we then go on to WITN 3078012, this is the separate letter you wrote to Ms. Barlow, as agreed on my understanding of the board minutes, as agreed at the board meeting, and it's on the issue of appointment of trustees, so we can see that in the second paragraph. You say in the third paragraph, I discussed with the board our whole conversation, including your thoughts on possible outcomes with the Penrose inquiry and your possible plans to write to the Department of Health. We also discussed our response to the APPG report and recent backbench debate. You then talk about, in the next paragraph, how the majority of your members that you hear from are very unhappy and share interactions with Skipton, Caxton and Macfarlane Trust staff with the Haemophilia Society. And then you refer to the Haemophilia Society's decision to write to the Minister and the Secretary of State to say that the Alliance House organisations are not fit for purpose. You don't mention in your letter to Ms. Barlow her statement or the fact that that statement's been flagged up to the Minister in your letter to the Minister. Can you assist with why you didn't mention it in the letter to Ms. Barlow?
The overwhelming and the key issue we wanted to ensure they understood was that the Board of Trustees felt that the organisations were not fit for purpose. That was the issue that we felt was, I think, of the highest importance and probably had the biggest impact in our thinking. And because I and many of the Board of Trustees had heard from many people over a long period and several times that the impression that they had was that people at the Macfarlane Trust were concerned that maybe waiting longer was the right thing to do. It didn't feel like it was the first time it had been said. It didn't feel like it was the biggest issue. The most important thing was the fact that we were saying it was the organisations were not fit for purpose. So it wasn't a purposeful omission. It was more, it didn't enter my or the board's thoughts that we needed to put it in because that wasn't the overriding message we needed to get across.
Now, the letter to the ministers had been copied, I think, to a number of others. In fact, you say at the bottom of this letter that the letter that was going to be copied to the APPG, Alistair Burton, Shadow Health Ministers. If we go to WITN 3078013, and if we go to the third page, I'm not going to go through the email communications here in detail, but is it right to understand that this is these are email communications between the Haemophilia Society Board of Trustees on the question of whether what your account of Ms. Barlow's statement should be disseminated more widely? Is that right?
That's right. That's what that chain of emails was about. Yes.
If we go to the next page, I think if we look at the third paragraph of your email, you were, it would appear from that, concerned that reporting Ms. Barlow's statement, as you recall it, could cause distress. And so you were, is this right, reticent about sharing that more widely at this point?
I was concerned about their beneficiaries hearing something like that because I thought it would be distressing to hear.
But a debate took place amongst the trustees, and the prevailing view was that it should be more widely publicised. Is that correct?
It was, and one of the reasons for that was that one of the trustees pointed out it could come to light as part of a freedom of information request, and so we should be open about what we say, and so we may as well publish it.
Okay, and I think we can see that from WITN 3078014. If we go to the third page, again, I'm not going to go through the entirety of the email traffic, but we can see from this that by the 22nd of February, you're emailing the board saying it seems the consensus is to publish, and you say, having heard from everyone, I think it makes sense, and then reference is made to transparency and also to the possibility of publication under freedom of information. So the letter was then published on the following day, the 23rd of February 2015. Is that right? Amongst other matters, I think it went on the Haemophilia Society's website.
Yes, I think that date is correct, and it was around lunchtime it went up.
Okay. So that's the 23rd of February. Now, if we next look at WITN 3078015, and we go to the second page, and we look at the bottom half of the page, we can see you're sending an email again to the board. It's dated the 23rd of February, 4:39, so it's later that day. And you're referring there to having had a call from Mr. Evans. But before we look at what you say in the email, what can you tell us about your recollection of that telephone call?
I remember him being very angry, shouting quite a lot. I remember him clearly saying that it wasn't true and Jan had definitely not said that. I also remember him saying, if it was said, it was me sort of recalling something I'd heard or something like that. He told me that we had to retract the letter, we had to do it very quickly, he tried to call Bernard. I think I recall him saying he tried to call Bernard, who was the chair of the Haemophilia Society at the time.
Okay. And then if we look at the text of the email, you've said this. I just wanted to let you know I've just had a call from Roger Evans, who's very angry about the letter we sent. He says it's libelous as this was not said. And if anything was said, it was him recounting an anecdote. Is that what you've just told us?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you say this is absolutely not true, and Jan definitely was the person who said the government should wait before responding to Penrose, so more people will have died and it will be cheaper, and as the years go on, there'll be less people to fight. And then you talk about what Mr. Evans said about retraction, and then further down reference to calling Mr. Manson. And then you record Mr. Evans as saying, I forever damaged the good relationship between the Haemophilia Society and the Macfarlane Trust. Do you recall him talking about the relationship between the two bodies?
I do. I don't remember the exact wording, but yes.
Now, if we then go, please, to WITN 3078016. We go to the second page. Top of the second page, the bottom of the page is the email we've just looked at. We've got an email here from Mr. Manson, so that's the chair of the Haemophilia Society, a couple of hours later, to you, copied to the Board of Trustees. And he refers to having discussed it with you. What do you recall, if anything, about your conversation with Mr. Manson?
My recollection is really about us thinking what's the best thing to do to reduce risk to the organisation, and to give us time to talk to the Macfarlane Trust about what should happen next and get some legal advice, because they had threatened that they would take action if we didn't do something quickly. So we thought we ought to get some advice, and that we should take the letter off the website, which is what we actually did that day.
Okay. And so the letter was taken down, and then I think it's right that something was published in its place on the website. Sorry, I'm just going to have to look elsewhere to get the reference for that. Seamus, it is find it in these papers. It is you might need to go back into the documents of Mr. Evans for this, Seamus. It's MACF 5022_026. So the date of this is the 24th of February 2015. So this is the next day. This is posted, is it on the Haemophilia Society's website? It's
yes, that's correct.
Described as a statement by you, and it says, we've been contacted by the Chief Executive and Chairman of the Macfarlane Trust with regard to opinions attributed to them in the letter from the Haemophilia Society to Jane Ellison. They say that the comments in that letter, which were attributed to their Chairman and Chief Executive, were never made and categorically do not reflect the views of the Chairman, the Chief Executive, or anyone else associated with the Macfarlane Trust. We wish to make clear that this was Mrs. Carroll's impression of her recent meeting with the Chairman and Chief Executive, but we are happy to accept their assurance today that this is not the view of the Chairman or the Chief Executive. What was the purpose of publishing this statement on the website, Mrs. Carroll?
We'd had some legal advice by then, and the advice was that this is what we should publish, we'd been asked to put a retraction or apology, I can't remember the words, on our website within 24 hours. And having taken legal advice, this is what was suggested.
May I just make an inquiry? The legal advice presumably was given to the society, was it?
That's correct.
Are we sure that no issue of legal professional privilege arises?
I think we're fairly confident, sir, because Mrs. Carroll is represented by the Haemophilia Society solicitors, and the documents that have been exhibited to her, her witness statement, which refer to the advice as does her statement, have effectively come via the Haemophilia Society solicitors.
Very well.
Perhaps Mrs. Carroll can confirm whether that's the position.
Absolutely, we were willing to share these.
Thank you.
So this was posted on the 24th of February 2015, and if we then, again, there have been further, I think, internal deliberations amongst the Haemophilia Society trustees, which I'm not going to go to all of them, but I think picking up on what you've just said, if we go to WITN 3078018, and we go to the second page, the top email, which is dated the 24th of February, refers to you having spoken to a barrister and saying, no doubt the right thing to do is to publish a retraction. There's a reasonable risk they would take it further, and they've said on their website they have demanded this. The barrister is drafting something along the lines of, my recollection is this is what they said, they dispute it, so we'll retract it as we don't want to harm the charity. So is the conversation that you're relaying there what we see then reflected in the document that we just looked at on the Society's website?
That's right.
Now, that was on the 24th of February. I'm going to go in a minute to the solicitor's letter that was sent to both you directly and to the Haemophilia Society dated the 26th of February. But before I do that, other than the telephone conversation that you have relayed with Mr. Evans, did you receive any further direct contact from the McFarlane Trust over this period of time? Are you aware of whether Mr. Manson received any further communications from the McFarlane Trust?
I don't think he did, because he would have said, I'm sure, so I don't think anybody did.
If we go then to the 26th of February, WITN 3078019. And we go to the next page. We can see this is a letter written by Wilson Solicitors dated the 26th of February 2015. This is addressed to you. If we pick it up in the first sentence, we can see it said, we act on behalf of the incorporated trustees of the McFarlane Trust, Roger Evans and Jan Barlow. This letter is being sent separately to the Haemophilia Society and its chief executive, Liz Carroll. And then if we go to, I'm not going to go through all of it by any stretch of the imagination. If we go to the second page, and we look at the bottom half of the page, we can see the paragraph beginning, so it's the second main paragraph down on the screen. The letter falsely states that at a recent meeting, Mr. Evans and Miss Barlow expressed the opinion that the Department of Health should wait before responding to Penrose, etc. And then if we skip down over the next paragraph, we then see it says the allegations are completely false and without any foundation, as Mrs. Carroll knows. Then it said the allegations are seriously defamatory. And if we then go over the page, and we look at the second half of the page again, we can see the paragraph, the second paragraph on the screen, recording Mr. Evans, Miss Barlow's and the trustees' distress, and then saying they're shocked that Mrs. Carroll would make up such false allegations but it is clear that she published the allegations knowing they were false and with malice. Nothing either Mr. Evans or Miss Barlow said on the 29th of January could possibly have provided any basis for such a complete fabrication. And then there is set out on the following page, if we just go to the following page, we can see the numbered paragraphs 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see what the Haemophilia Society and you were there being asked to do, which included at 4 retracting the false allegations and publishing a clear, fulsome and unequivocal apology. And then if we look to the, if we just go further down the page, please, Shomik. You'll see the longer paragraph in the middle of the screen, Mrs. Carroll. If THS, the Haemophilia Society, and Mrs. Carroll are not prepared to take proper and responsible action to remedy the damage, our client will regrettably have to consider taking further action, which may ultimately include recourse to issuing legal proceedings. And then further down, towards the bottom of the page, it refers to a hope that the Haemophilia Society and Mrs. Carroll will act promptly and responsibly. What, if anything, can you recall was your reaction to the receipt of the letter, Mrs. Carroll?
I was really surprised in that I thought, and the Board of Trustees all felt, we had done everything that had been asked of us when Mr. Evans originally contacted me to say, remove the letter from anywhere we had access to, and to publish an apology or retraction, I can't remember the wording. I think we felt we'd done that, having taken legal advice. Our legal team felt we had done that. So this was a huge surprise and a shock, and the fact that it was addressed to the Board of Trustees and me personally was also a shock, because I've been acting on behalf of the Board of Trustees as many chief execs do.
And was it your understanding at the time that this might result in legal proceedings being taken against both the Haemophilia Society and you personally?
Having spoken to the legal team, that's what they advised me.
And then if we look at WITN 3078020, and we go to the third page, again, there are a range of different email communications between you and members of the board. You say, actually, sorry, if we go first, Shomik, if we go to the last but one page of this document first, so I can do it in time order. We can see, if we look just over a third of the way down the page, there's an email from you, 26th of February. It says, "Dear trustees, this came today." That, I think, is a reference to the letter from Wilson's solicitors. You say, "I've spoken to Bernard to have a call booked with the barrister. I've removed everything from Facebook." And then you talk about not being prepared to take the personal risk and wanting to do everything asked. And then you're going to speak to the barrister. So that's 26th of Feb. And then if we go in the same document, show it now to page 3. We can see then about almost halfway down the page, there's an email from you the following day, 27th of February. Again, it's to various members of the Board of Trustees. You refer to having spoken to the barrister and being told we have a good case on some points and not on others if it went to court. And then you said in the first line of it, "Thank you for your emails. I do understand what you're saying and I know what I heard." What do you mean by "I know what I heard"?
I think further down the email trail, people were saying I shouldn't retract it, because people would then look and think, well, was I not telling the truth if I had retracted it? I think that's what the email was saying. But when I'm saying I know what I heard, what I meant was I knew that that's what was said in the meeting by Jan Barlow.
Now, again, there are various email communications. I don't think we need to look at the majority of them. But if we go to WITN 30780022, and we go to the second page, we can see at the bottom of the page is an email from Mr. Manson to trustees, copied to you. It's dated the 27th of February. You can see it's late at night. Trustees, Liz has spoken with our barrister and exchanged emails twice today. The upshot is that we had unequivocal advice that we should make a clear statement that we now accept that Jan did not say what was quoted, and that we apologise. If we did not do this and they pursued us legally, then the society and Liz personally would be hugely at risk. No court could be relied on to believe the evidence of a single witness, however credible, against the testimony of two witnesses, however tarnished. So just pausing there, I just want to ensure that I've understood this correctly. The advice you got was to essentially settle and do what the McFarlane Trust had asked you to do, because it was the word of one against two. Is that is somewhat crude summary, but is that the effect of the advice that you had received?
Yes, and that the McFarlane Trust had pursued this quite aggressively, and there was a feeling that they wouldn't stop if we didn't do what was asked by them.
And then we can see Mr. Manson continues, I met with Liz today, and after discussion and agreement, I instructed her to follow the legal advice. I take responsibility for bypassing the board in taking this decision. I explain below why I did this. And then he refers to, if we go fifth paragraph on that page, a minority of trustees have strongly argued that we and Liz should fight this as a matter of principle. My position is that while it's deeply annoying to be made to apologise where we feel we've done no wrong, this in itself is trivial compared with the underlying issues around the reform of the trusts, and we should concentrate on working with the APPG in this and not be sidetracked into expending our resources on a quarrel with individuals. The next paragraph then refers to a fear that if guilt was admitted, there'd be further pressure. Next paragraph, some trustees have also suggested that if we stood firm, Roger would not press legal action. I'm sympathetic to this view, but as charity trustee, I cannot risk exposing the charity to litigation costs, potentially in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, together with the possibility of having to pay damages, together with distracting the charity from working for its beneficiaries. We've seen in the last few days how much stress and how much extra work for Liz this incident has caused. This is simply not sustainable. And then if we go down to the next long paragraph, I appreciate that some people will see the society apologising to Jan and Roger as a betrayal of those who've suffered from contaminated blood. With the benefit of hindsight, we did damage this community by including the offending passage in the original letter, and we are now in damage limitation. I'm sure most people will recognise our action now as necessary prudence under legal pressure. We stand by the rest of Liz's letter, etc. And then he says, next paragraph, he says, I'm sorry if I've upset any of you by taking this action without further consultation. Next paragraph, the most important thing we should be doing now is supporting Liz. She's borne the brunt of the pressure on this, and until the situation is resolved, she continues to be under threat of being sued personally. Is this correct? And please do correct me if this is wrong. Following the receipt of the barrister's advice, you and Mr. Manson met and discussed the issue, and it was ultimately he who took the decision as chair of the Haemophilia Society, for reasons he explains in the body of this, that the Haemophilia Society should effectively retract the earlier statement. Is that correct?
That's right, and it was taking into account the legal advice, but also the discussion that had taken place by email by the whole board, where the majority, I think there were only two trustees who didn't feel that would be the right course of action. And
so we see then the letter that was sent by the Haemophilia Society's solicitors at WITN 30780023. Next page. letter of the 27th of February 2015. Go further down the page. So we can see it says, in the shared hope it will be possible to resolve this matter without recourse to costly and time-consuming litigation. We're instructed to put forward the following proposal in full and final settlement of any claim. And then we can see one is publication of a retraction and apology, and some suggested wording is enclosed. 2 is an undertaking not to further publish the statement. 3, removal of the 24th of February statement. Yeah, and that's it. So that's the proposal. Now, again, I don't think I necessarily need to go through all of the communications, but is this right? And if you want to look at any of the letters, Mrs. Carroll, please say so. There was some further back and forth between the Society's solicitors and the Trust solicitors, not least about the precise wording. And one of the issues was whether the word false should be used or whether the word incorrect should be used. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Without going in, as I say, into all of it, I think we can see, if we look at WITN 30788026, we go to the second page. Bottom half of the page. So this is the solicitors for the McFarlane Trust, Mr. Evans and Ms. Barlow, under paragraph numbered 3, second paragraph down. Our clients do not accept the replacement of the word false with incorrect. The clear advice we've received from counsel is that the letter falsely and without merit brings into disrepute our client's reputation. Publishing the letter was reckless as there was nothing that either Mr. Evans or Miss Barlow stated at their meeting with Mrs. Carroll which could possibly have provided any reasonable basis for such an allegation. The allegation made by your clients is not correct, it is false, and therefore our clients insist that the word false remains in the apology. If we go to WITN 30788027, second page. This is an email from you, Mrs. Carroll, and you say in this, you refer to having had this, I don't know what this is, back from the solicitor, but you say this: if we agree to publish the apology with the word false, not incorrect, we are there, with no further cost/negotiating required. I know this was one Bernard was insistent on, but as long as our barrister doesn't think it harmful, I would think it's sensible to go with this. Our members and those who read the letter will know the truth. So is this correct, Mrs. Carroll, that you agreed to the use of the word false in place of the use of the word incorrect, and is a reason for doing that because of what's said there, we are there with no further cost/negotiating required? In other words, it would resolve the dispute.
That's right. It was in agreement with several of the trustees, and I think Bernard was not around at the time because he was going away, and so I think it was the vice chair who discussed it with me and agreed that it was the right action to stop this so that there were no further costs required.
And then if we go to WITN 30788028, and go to the second paragraph, is this the text of the apology that was then issued by the Haemophilia Society and by you? It says, in a letter dated 10th of February 2015, etc., we stated that at a recent meeting, the Macfarlane Trust's Chair and Chief Executive, Roger Evans and Jan Barlow, had advocated to Mrs Carroll that the government should delay its response to the Penrose inquiry so that more people would have died as a result of contaminated blood products, and the government would therefore have to pay lower amounts of compensation to the victims. We now accept that Mr Evans, Ms Barlow and the Macfarlane Trust did not express the opinions attributed to them in our letter in that meeting, and that these do not reflect the views of Mr Evans, Ms Barlow and the Macfarlane Trust. We take this opportunity to retract this false allegation and to apologise unreservedly for any distress and embarrassment caused to Mr Evans, Ms Barlow and the Macfarlane Trust by the publication of our letter. We've undertaken not to repeat this false allegation. We also apologise unreservedly to the beneficiaries of the Macfarlane Trust for any anxiety that we may have caused them. So you and the Haemophilia Society both apologised and accepted in this that what had been said about the 29th of January meeting was false.
That's right, on the legal advice.
Just before I come back to that, can I just ask you to look at a couple of letters that followed the settlement of the legal dispute? WITN 3078029, please. Next page. This is a letter from Mr Evans to Mr Manson. He refers in the second paragraph to the Macfarlane Trust having had, this is second paragraph, second line, a long history of good relations with the Haemophilia Society, but this has deteriorated over the last 12 months and the relationship has been deeply damaged by what's happened in the last 3 weeks. Consequently, at a board meeting on the 6th of March 2015, the board of MFT reviewed the way it intends to engage with the Haemophilia Society. And then the next paragraph refers to the question about the Haemophilia Society nominating trustees. And Mr Evans says the board's no longer is decided not to invite the Haemophilia Society to nominate a replacement appointment. And then the next paragraph says this: also as a result of recent events, the MFT board has no confidence that there can be a constructive relationship with your chief executive, Liz Carroll, and MFT is not willing to work with her. The MFT board has therefore agreed that any communication between the board and chief executive of MFT and the Haemophilia Society must be with yourself. And then, before I ask you one question arising out of that, if we just look at Mr Manson's response, WITN 3, oh no, sorry, that's his response to you. We may not have it here, but Mr Manson, we looked at it with Mr Evans this afternoon, wrote to Mr Evans in, I think, April, saying that the board of the Haemophilia Society continued to have full confidence in you. In relation to what's said in the last paragraph of this letter, did you have any further dealings with Mr Evans or Ms Barlow?
Not that I can remember.
And I think your statement says that you didn't speak to either of them again, not because you didn't want, not because you were choosing not to speak to them, but there was simply no further dialogue between you or either Ms Barlow or Mr Evans. Is that right?
That's right.
How did the Haemophilia Society manage its relationship with the Macfarlane Trust from 2015 onwards until the point in time at which the Macfarlane Trust was wound up?
As I said previously, there wasn't a huge amount of contact anyway, but if there were issues that were brought to me by the beneficiaries of the Macfarlane Trust, who were our members or members of the community, where they asked me if I could help with something or to contact the Macfarlane Trust, I would do that, but it would generally be by email. If I ever did need to ring, I would ring the main switchboard number for the Macfarlane Trust, so it would speak to whoever it would be that would answer the phone. Whereas previously I might have asked specifically to speak to Ms Barlow, but I think if it did arise after that, I would have just rung the main reception number.
Now, Mrs. Carroll, you understand to think that both Ms. Barlow and Mr. Evans say that at that meeting on the 29th of January 2015, Ms. Barlow did not say what you say she said, and they point to, amongst other things, the apology and retraction that we looked at a few minutes ago, which says that it had been a false allegation. Do you have any comment in relation to that? And are you able to tell us now what your account is of that meeting on the 29th of January 2015?
I remember those words being said, and the reason the retraction and the apology took place was that legally we were advised, and I was advised, that that's what we should do. And the reason we chose to accept that that's what we should do was the risk to the charity in terms of cost. We didn't have the funds to fight this. It could have brought the charity down, and we all felt that it was essential that the charity continue to exist. And for me personally, it would have had a hugely damaging impact, potentially, if it had gone further. And so it felt as if there was no choice but to publish the retraction and the apology.
It might be said, therefore, that on the basis of what you say the true position is, the apology and the retraction themselves contain a false statement. Would you accept that? And is there anything further you would want to say about that?
I think that is true and is quite difficult, because that's not at all how I would want to behave.
Mrs. Carroll, I've got one further matter I want to ask you about, which is an unrelated matter, and then I think we'll want to take a break so that recognised legal representatives have the opportunity to ask or suggest any further questions.
Yes.
The unrelated matter I wanted to ask you about is the question of what happened to the McFarlane Trust's reserves. You were still the chief executive of the Haemophilia Society until, as you told us last year, so you were the chief executive at the point in time at which the McFarlane Trust ceased to operate and the new national schemes took the place of the Alliance House organisations. As far as you are aware, did the McFarlane Trust ever approach you or any of your colleagues at the Haemophilia Society on the question of what to do with the reserves?
No.
And was it ever brought to your attention, as far as you can recall, prior to the McFarlane Trust being wound up, that a transfer of the reserves to the Terence Higgins Trust was proposed?
Not that I recall, until it was sort of public.
So those are currently the questions I have for Mrs. Carroll, but as I say, it may well be that recognised legal representatives would want to suggest
Yes,
further questions.
We'll take a break, and shall I say not before 4:45, and that means, I'm afraid, it may be a few minutes after that, but you'll understand why.
Of course.
Thank you, sir.
So 4:45 at the earliest.